So today we're going to be talking about the end of Act 4 of Macbeth and just the beginning of Act 5. And the last time we met and we spoke, we knew that Macbeth had sent his soldiers to Macduff's castle to kill his entire family and everyone in the castle. He had gotten a premonition from the witches to beware of Macduff. And even though he was pretty sure that Macduff was born of woman, he said, I'm going to kill everyone anyway. He's so paranoid that he at that point really wasn't trusting Macduff. Macduff didn't come to a dinner party. He had a spy in Macduff's castle. So Macbeth decided that was a good decision. And we know at that point, unfortunately, Macduff is in England right now, trying to convince Malcolm to come back to take over the throne of Scotland. Scotland is in horrible shape unless Malcolm comes back. They're going to have to keep putting up with Macbeth at this point. So he is really imperative at this point that Macduff make sure that Malcolm comes back. But it's not going to be easy on any level. We kind of know that Malcolm doesn't have the personality really to be leader. He would have stayed. If that were true, he would have been king right after his father was killed. And if he had stayed in Scotland, he would have been the rightful king, but he left with his brother. He was more fearful for himself at that point. And I think that still lingers with him a little bit, that he fled, right? So he's questioning at this point, can I be a good leader? And he's coming up with all of these different excuses why he thinks he would be a bad leader. He first tells Macduff that he'd be really greedy. If he knew that he was king, he would be filled with avarice, which is a deadly sin, right? And he'd just want everything. And the other thing he says is that he really likes women, that he would be a big womanizer and the power would get to his head. And he just thinks that he just really wouldn't be a good leader. He doesn't trust himself right now. But Macduff isn't going to back down. Like, he needs Malcolm to come back. He's pretty certain that actually Malcolm would be a good leader. He's really young. He has to convince him, right? He's like, Scotland has never been in a worse state ever. Things are terrible there. No one could be as bad a leader as Macbeth is right now. And the one thing I think that strikes a really big chord with Malcolm is he reminds him, you are Duncan's son. Your mother is a noble person. You come from great stock. That has to speak for something. You have to believe in yourself. You come from a line of really, really people of good character, of really good leaders. So that speaks well of you. You need to think about this. He's scared. He's just scared. He really is. And he admits to Malcolm that the things he was saying weren't really true. He's not greedy. He's like, I've never even been with a woman, so I don't really think I'm a womanizer. But he's afraid. He's afraid to have to go now after what he's done. And he knows what it's going to entail to take Scotland over. But he says, my first false speaking was this upon myself. He's like, I just disparaged myself. I'm really not like that. And I need to step up to the plate and do the right thing. So with Malcolm backing him and on this great speech that he's going to be a good leader, he is all fired up right now. He's like, yeah, I need to do it. I need to do this for my father. Pretty much Macduff was telling me, if you don't do this for yourself, you need to do this for your dad. You really do. You need to come back. You need to do the right thing. So he said that he's going to bring old Seward and 10,000 of the English army to go and defeat Macbeth. So he has to bring this regime of English soldiers to go help him take over the throne. So it's at this point that Ross comes from Scotland, and it's a little foreshadowing, a little dramatic irony here. The dramatic irony, of course, is that we already know that Macduff's family is killed, right? And right after Malcolm says, yes, I'm going to come back, Macduff doesn't even know what to say. He's kind of so overcome that he's gotten Malcolm to come and do it. But he says, such welcome and unwelcome things at once is hard to reconcile. So again, a little bit of that ambiguous talk, that equivocation right there. So the news is good that Malcolm's coming home, right? So that's the good news. The bad news is it's going to be a big fight. There's an impending fight for power there. So he knows that a lot of people are going to get killed. It's going to be bad. So there's good and bad, right? There's also dramatic irony because we know what has just happened, right? We talked about that. And he came and he did his job. That's the good thing, right? The good news is he came to England. Malcolm's coming back. Hopefully they're going to save Scotland. But the bad news is it's at the cost of his family, which is horrible. So it's really the worst news ever. And Ross needs to tell him, but he kind of has to get the lay of the land first. He wants to know if they had convinced Malcolm to come back. So he kind of waits and feels that out first. And they're like, yes, everything's good. Malcolm has agreed to come home. So now Ross knows he has to give the news to Macduff. And he says to him, let not your ears despise my tongue forever, which shall possess them with the heaviest sound that ever yet they heard. It's kind of like that expression, please don't kill the messenger. Like, I have to tell you something that is the worst news ever. It's just unbearable for me to speak. When Macduff hears that his family has been killed, he's immediately consumed with guilt. He can't even fathom that his wife, he says it several times. He says, my wife, my children. His speech is really stuttered. It's like he's taking in this information and he just can't quite digest like the enormity of what has just happened, right? It's the worst thing. And we know that Macbeth has now crossed the line from being a soldier to killing men to killing women and children. I mean, it is just beyond evilness at this point. And I think the worst thing for Macduff is he knows that his family is dead, not because they did anything wrong. It's because Macbeth hates him, right? They were struck for thee, not that I am, not for their own demerits, but for mine. So there's where the guilt obviously comes in. He's like, they didn't even do anything. And Macbeth just killed them because he hates me so much. So now Macduff is obviously on war path. He says, bring thou this fiend of Scotland and myself within my sword's length set him. If he scape heaven, forgive him too. He vows to seek revenge. Not only is he said that we're going to get Macbeth, he goes, I'm going to kill him myself. Like, I literally have to be the one that seeks revenge for my entire family at this point. So now we go into Act 5. Act 4 ends that way with Macduff vowing revenge on Macbeth and everything he's done to his family. Act 5 starts with us seeing how disturbed Lady Macbeth is at this point. It starts with a great perturbation. Sorry, hard word to say. A perturbation is a disruption of a natural system, in this case, sleep, caused by something from the outside. And in this case, it's all the horrible things that Macbeths have done, right? So Lady Macbeth is sleepwalking, which is almost criminal, right? They haven't been able to sleep at all. But like the doctor says, it's just horrible if you're sleeping, but you can't really sleep. So now you're like in this state of chaos, right? And her gentlewoman has been seeing Lady Macbeth act in a very strange manner for a long time. So she's called the doctor in, and she tells him she's constantly reading letters. She always has a candle in her hand. She can't be in the dark, and she's constantly washing her hands all the time. This is pretty familiar, right? She wants the spots off her hand, just like Macbeth wanted the blood off his hands. Right after he killed Duncan, there was actual blood there. Lady Macbeth has this imaginary blood, and it's all over her. It's all over her. She can't get it off. She says she would never have thought the old man to have so much blood in him. And she's referring to Duncan. And not only the blood in Duncan, but the blood that has come from Duncan, right? Again, we talked about this idea that she thought they would kill Duncan and have this marvelous life. She never imagined all the deaths that would come after Duncan. And what really pushed her over the edge again, she says, the Thane of Fife had a wife. Now Macbeth is killing women and children. What has she done? I mean, we at one point thought she had no soul, that she was like this horrible person, right? And she's not the best person. She kind of instigated all of this. But the only thing is, she never really thought all of this was going to happen. And I think the thing that is destroying Lady Macbeth is she sees that she has destroyed her husband. She really wanted to give him this kingship, and she thought it was what he deserved, what he wanted. And now she's seeing that she has literally destroyed him. He is an entirely different person. And that part is what she really can't handle. I think she's wishing that they could just go back to normal. They didn't have a terrible life. Like, she says, wash your hands, put on your nightgown, look not so pale. I tell you yet again, Banquo's buried. He cannot come out on its grave. She's realizing what she's done with Macbeth, and there's no turning back time. They really can't go forward. There's nowhere for them to go. They are trapped. They are so trapped, and this is eating on her and plaguing her, and she sleepwalks and perseverates on it all day, all night. So the doctor ends again. The doctor says, foul whisperings are abroad, unnatural deeds do breed unnatural troubles. Infected minds to their death pillows will discharge their secrets. So he doesn't know exactly what they've done, but she's talking about killing Banquo and other things. And, he's a doctor, so he's not going to say necessarily anything, but they know the Macbeths are in trouble. They've done horrible things. Everyone pretty much knows at this point that they've done horrible things. This sets up what is about to come. The English army is now descending on Scotland, right? This is similar to the scene where the porter is setting up the death of Duncan. It's a warning of sorts of this unnatural progression and this idea that it breeds horrible, horrible things. So we find out right after that, even the Scottish army hates Macbeth. They hate him. They talk about his secret murders are sticking on his hands. They say those he commands move only in command, nothing in love. Now does he feel his title hang loose about him like a giant's robe upon a dwarfish thief. His soldiers only fight because Scotland is their country, but really they want the leadership turned over. They do not want Macbeth to be king, and they're talking about right here, he's ripe for the picking. He's crazy. He's paranoid. They need to get him, and the English army needs to come now and do their job to get Macbeth off the throne. Macbeth is acting crazy. He still thinks he's super safe, right? Even though he's trapped in his castle, he's surrounded by the English army right now. He says, until Birnam Woods comes to my castle, I'm totally safe. And isn't Malcolm born of woman? So no one can touch me. He even tells his servant that the 10,000 soldiers are just mere geese to him. They can't harm him. They're just like little birds. And we find out that his right-hand man's name is Satan. That's a kind of funny little name, right, for Macbeth's right-hand man. So sometimes I think it's really important to notice that we see the old Macbeth peeking through. So he has this outer paranoid shell on now. He's a horrible fiend, a tyrant. But then on the top of 171, there's a passage where Macbeth talks about getting older. He says, my way of life is fallen into the sere, the yellow leaf, and that which should accompany old age as honor, love, obedience, troops of friends. I must not look to have, but in their stead curses, not loud, but deep, mouth honor, breathe which the poor heart would fain deny and dare not. So Macbeth is actually not afraid to battle at this point because he doesn't see a future for himself. He knows that he has no friends, that he's never going to be looked upon as honorable again. So all of those things actually do eat at him. I mean, you see this other side of Macbeth every once in a while. He knows that he's not a good person, and he really knows that there's nothing he can do about it at this point. But but he's still super worried about Lady Macbeth. Now, kind of like the roles have changed. He knows that he needs to protect her. He knows that she's